All right. Well, hey Ryan, welcome to the Private Practice Elevation podcast. Excited to learn from you and just learn a little bit more about you. Welcome on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, and yeah, I always am interested in talking about personal finance. So this is a fun thing for me to do.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's kind of the best part about podcasts and interviews and stuff like that. I get to learn from people who love to geek out on their thing. And
Right.
then
Yeah.
I get to geek out on my thing when I'm on other people's podcasts. So I think it's a win-win and everybody gets to learn and grow. And I'm excited to meet you. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about, who you are, what you do, and tell us a little bit about your story. Like, how did you get into what you're doing surrounding financial I don't,
Yeah.
I'll let
I'll,
you
I'll
go.
I'll I'll
I
take
don't
it
want
from
to put
there.
words in your mouth
Yeah, no worries.
about what you do. Go for it.
Yeah, no, my name's Ryan Derousseau. I'm a fee-only financial advisor, and I'm based out of Hauppauge, Long Island, which I know you know well, Daniel, is where you're from
Yes.
and
Yeah,
whatnot.
so for people listening, that is right where I grew up. So where is your office located?
Oh, I am terrible with Long Island roads. So I am not a
Okay.
native Long Islander, so
I think I looked it
I
up and
forget.
it was very close. So I grew up very close to Hauppauge High School, Vets Highway over
Motor
there.
Parkway. That's what it
Motor
is. Yeah, Motor
Parkway. Yeah.
Parkway.
Okay. I
Yeah,
think I know exactly where it is. Yeah, I was kind of by where Vets Parkway meets Vets Highway meets Motor Parkway. So yeah,
yeah,
I know
very
all
cool.
about that area.
Yeah,
Okay.
very
Sorry.
close to that. Yeah, it's addendum, but no. So I'm a fee only financial planner, and I work with therapists to basically help their finances thrive while they're working on with clients. And how I came to this is a very long and winding road. I was a writer for many years. I wrote for publications you've probably read, like Fortune, Money. I've been in the New York Times, CNBC, stuff like that,
Oh, cool.
and covering personal finances. In fact, one of my first jobs coming out of school was with Money, where I covered financial advisors. So I covered the people that I am now today, and in that I learned like what's smart and what's right from the consumer perspective versus what's shady and not the best way to go about things from
Yeah.
the advisor perspective. And so I did that for many years. But then after COVID, I worked for myself, and so I was alone a lot. Even though I have a family, I was alone a lot, and I just really wanted to work one on one with people. And so I took my skills of finances
Hmm.
and got it what's called a CFP, which means a certified financial planner. So I got the education, teamed up with a group, got the background and the people who understood sort of the day to day, and that's where I am today.
Awesome. Awesome. And so tell me a little bit more about how you got to working a little bit more with folks in private practice
Yeah.
and therapists and a little bit about like your client base.
Yeah, absolutely. So, really, how that came about is because I worked as a self-employed writer for many many years, and you want to talk about a tough business. The writing business is a tough one,
I
but I
bet.
survived and I thrive. I frankly thrived at it, partly because of luck and the ability to write for some great publications and have that sort of expertise, but also because of all the sort of tools I learned in that experience, both writing about it, but also just making sure that I was getting like the most money back for what the work that I was doing. And
Mhm.
so I basically spent 10 years doing this on the ground research. And then when I shifted to financial planning, what I found was when I'd be reaching out to self-employed people, a group that one I really connected with, and then two, they really seemed to connect with me and kind of needed the guidance were therapists, and it really was kind of kismet because you know like my experience as in my self-employment isn't too different than a therapist. They have more oversight and more like law concerns, but
Mhm.
from like a tax and savings and managing the business type of thing, it was very similar, and so it just became this like natural fit. On top of that, like I would say, like I've had the same therapist for like 10 years. He's basically sort of like a business guide for me at this point. Basically, since I'm alone a lot, I use him as like a sounding board for things that I
Yeah.
have going on from a business perspective, and it's been incredibly helpful. I never would have done what I've done now. I'm so much happier with what I do now than I did before, and so it's also kind of a way of giving back. I think
Yeah.
is sort of how I got there.
Yeah, I love that, and it sounds like you're doing really like good work connecting with people who are similar to you, and kind of
Hmm.
as far as the business goes. And I know I'm sure there's a lot of solo practitioners, solo therapists running their private practices, and I know for my own journey and my wife's journey starting businesses, when we talk about financial stuff, it's a lot of just learning as you go and just
Yeah.
kind of figuring it out. And so I'm glad that there's folks like you that can kind of help us navigate this stuff.
Yeah.
And
Real quick, I would say
yeah,
like that learning as you go. Like I always say, like it's not like I never made mistakes. I mean, I came across like a tax savings tool maybe 8 years into my career. If I had learned that 8 years earlier, I would have saved thousands and thousands of dollars.
mm,
But at least I learned it,
right.
like at least I got to start saving after the fact. But that's life. Like that's
Yeah.
like finances are just kind of mimic life. We learn as we go, and there's no point in sort of harping on the mistakes previously. It's just sort of
Yeah,
fixing moving forward.
absolutely. And now you've got that knowledge, and now you're able to help other folks so they don't make the same mistakes.
Exactly. Yeah.
So why don't we
Hopefully.
get into that? Help us not make the same mistakes. So what do you want to really discuss when it comes to finances? And I know we talked about increasing returns in a private
Mhm.
practice. So where do we begin with that?
Yeah. So I'll get into some specific stuff, as we talk. But first thing I want to talk a little bit about is just understanding your business and life goals. Like, people come to a financial planner thinking, okay, now you're gonna like invest my returns and get a bunch of money, but better returns than I don't do that. Like I'm an index fund investor. Like we are just trying to match the market. Instead, what we do is we look at your entire financial picture and determine how do you use all that you have to work with to reach the life goals that you have set for yourself.
Mm,
I talk to people who want to retire by 55. I also talk to people who want to retire at 90. Uh, you know, how they get there is going to be so different. But some of the tools they use are going to be the same. It's just their path to getting there is going to look so different. And so understanding what those goals are going to dictate like how much you're investing in the business, what you're doing, whether you're going to like a group practice, whether you want to go to a group practice. But it's also what you're doing on the personal side. So like how much of the business are you capturing on the personal side? How much are you saving? That sort of stuff.
mm.
And so it's really important to kind of put the goals in focus first. Because I don't think it's something that people necessarily realize when it comes to financial planning.
Yeah, I think that that's super important, and I think that that's something that I've been kind of again learning as I'm going, because really when I started my business, it's just mostly how do I provide for the family, and hopefully there'll be some to like save. And then as you get older, you start thinking about retirement and stuff like that. And well,
Mhm.
what do I really want my life to look like? That's also that's something that Ramit Sethi is really big on. I don't know if you've read his book, I'll Teach You to Be Rich, and just basic guidelines for investing, or just and he talks about what does your rich life look like does
Mhm.
that mean basically I just want to go out to eat with my family like every weekend, or does that mean I really want to retire when I'm 45, 50, and those sorts of getting into your mind, or getting down on paper those goals. I think really, like you said, that really drives how are you going to get there. And I
Mhm.
also really like what you said about what do you have to work with now. Because I think when it comes to finances, I know for myself, you can get so overwhelmed, like, oh, I wish it looked like this is
Right.
where I want to get, this is where I want to go. But all I have right now is, maybe I'm saving $50 a month, So
Mhm.
I like how, you can kind of maybe think with the end in mind, and kind of pull it back to where you are now. And okay, what do we need to do to bridge that gap?
Absolutely. The thing I like about the goal approach also, and like I'm sure, like if we're talking to a talk therapist right now, like they're used to talking to their clients about goals and keeping their real focus on themselves as opposed to like other stuff around them, like
Hmm.
some wealthy billionaire doing something stupid or something like that. Um, and so that it helps with that, but it also helps with that business mindset because it keeps your focus. Like when if you know what your goals are and you know kind of how you're going to get there, and business is a little slow, uh, you're not. It reduces some of the anxiety because you're not feeling like you need to like blow up the business, or as someone who's been self-employed for many years, God forbid, go in-house somewhere or anything like that.
Hmm.
It just out of anxious like the desire to do something,
Right.
instead, that like if you have the goals in place, how you're going to get there, there's going to be downtime, there's going to be uptime, and it kind of reduces the stress on the business in the process, and so
Yeah.
that gives you
Hmm.
space to then weather that, and then grow when business picks up.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's like a foundation that you can always kind of fall back on. You can just kind of trust and have
Absolutely.
faith, work the plan, and keep moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. You want me to go to the next one, or?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, let's keep
Okay.
going.
Yeah, so the other thing I like to talk, and this then we'll get into a few more specific like moves, is talking a little bit about the personal versus the biz side, because so often we get stuck on the biz side, right? We
Hmm.
say, I'm going to grow the business. The business is going to become this income generator. It's going to like solve all my needs. And then as soon as we get started, the roof needs fixing. And so now
Hmm.
you have to put like 15,000 towards a roof. How's that going to impact the business? Many ways. You might have to pull cash out of the business. You may have less cash to invest in the business. You may feel like you're failing at the business because suddenly you're feeling a lot less flush on the personal side. And so
Hmm.
it's really important to put the business and the personal perspective together. So I know from a legal standpoint, like we get our LLCs, our PLLCs, and when we do taxes, we're doing a business tax form, we're doing a personal tax form, and that's fine. And that you should do that. You absolutely should do that. But when we're managing the finances, the two work together. And so just saying I'm going to focus on the biz and not look at the personal, well, it's ignoring, you know, the reason why you have the business.
Right.
And if you're saying you're only going to look at the personal, not the biz, well, then you're ignoring the biz, and we all know what's going to happen if you ignore the business. So managing the two, and the basic thing to do there is just having emergency funds for
Yeah.
both the business and the personal.
Hmm.
So one like a surprise on one isn't impacting the other, and vice versa.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I love
It,
that.
it also gets into how you pay yourself, honestly, because like if you are looking at your personal side, your expenses and you know what you need to cover each week. Well, that's
Hmm.
what you need, at least when you're starting off, where maybe you're not you don't have the huge business that you eventually will get. You know what your minimum salary should be because it
Yeah.
should cover your costs. And so
Hmm.
as long as you're covering your costs with the business, then you're doing good on the personal side. And then you can build that emergency fund on the business side.
Yeah, that's been helpful to me to know that okay, we need this each month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it would be awesome if there was extra, as we start to
Yeah.
get into investing and saving and that sort of thing. And I know for the first, few years of my business and my wife's business, it was really we were just happy to be covering our expenses and having just like a little bit left over.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when you kind of do that math, it also takes a lot of guessing out of okay, where does this need to be? Like, do I need $1 million business or practice? Or am I going to be good at 250K,
Mm-hmm.
and because it really provides everything that I need plus a little extra for saving, investing, giving, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's do you know the FIRE movement?
No.
So it's like that's called financial independence, retire early. So these
Yes.
are,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I
So
have
these
heard of
are
that.
groups of people who, really strive to retire incredibly early, sometimes by 30. And sometimes, I'm, I've written about them. I've talked to people who do it, and there's some good things that they do. Some of the things where they get caught up and like retiring earlier than anyone else, like that I could give, not give away. Well, I don't need. But the one thing that they talk about that I really think is important for anyone is really understanding those needs, because it basically what they're saying is I have enough to cover my needs and therefore I don't need to work anymore, and that's awesome. If you're just covering your needs and you're happy with that lifestyle that you have, then that's really the sweet spot. And that's really where you want the business to get. And so you can get to a situation in your career where you're only working 20 hours a week. Like how much freedom would that be for you if you were able to cover your expenses and you knew you're covered long term as well as short term in
Mhm.
20 hours a week versus 40 hours a week? For some, that would be miserable, but for others that would be like a dream come true.
Yeah.
And so putting that in perspective can really help with that. And that's really where having understanding the personal side is really going to help that business lifestyle and whatnot.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that was another thing that I learned again from Ramit
Yeah.
Ramit Sethi. I just read his book, so that's kind of fresh in my mind as we're talking through financial stuff. He's
Yeah.
got a Netflix special too that I watched.
Yeah, I haven't seen the Netflix special. He's definitely a prominent voice, and he has a lot of good messages for people who are kind of just starting out
Yeah,
on this
yeah.
path. Yeah.
hmm Yeah.
Great. And so the next thing we can get into some specifics, because you had mentioned retirement, and it's always one of those things that comes really late in a business owner's mind. It's like first I gotta get the clients, then I gotta make sure I'm getting the profits, and then once I
Yeah.
feel comfortable, then maybe I'll put a little bit in a solo 401k or SEP IRA or sort of whatever you're set up as. But I like to talk about retirement. And I say retirement, but it could be, financial independence for those people who want to work for the rest of their lives, or it can be retirement for someone who, wants to retire at 60. Um, it's one of the best uh, like secondary income streams you can ever create. And I put it this way because essentially what you're doing by investing in retirement is you're keeping a lot more of your revenues for yourself,
hmm
because you can put, I think it's 22,500 towards a 401k right now and not pay the IRS a dime on that amount. And so that's 22,500 potentially up to that you can say, hey, IRS, I'll pay you later when I need this money in retirement, but I'm going to keep it right now for myself and for my retirement.
hmm
So there's huge like today value for that. And you have to weigh whether you would rather pay the taxes on those savings today versus in the future. But that's a different discussion. But from a mental standpoint, if you see your retirement income or in portfolio rising, that is going to make you feel so much secure in your business. Like I cannot tell you, like when my wife and I like took this seriously a number of years ago, and we started seeing our savings past $200,000, past $300,000, and so on and so forth. Like how much power that gives you as a business owner
hmm
to say, hey, like one, like if things are slow, like I'm okay because my long-term goals are set. I just need to kind of figure out my cash flow today. So it reduces the amount of like stress. You just need to figure out today as opposed to today, future, whatever.
Yeah.
But it also just gives you a sense of wealth. If you're seeing your net worth grow, you're going to feel more confident in what you're doing, and you're going to feel willing to invest in the company in ways that you may not have been able to previously. So it can be extremely powerful in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for myself when it can be a little addicting, logging into Vanguard and looking at the returns and stuff. But yeah, it gives you a sense of kind of accomplishment. And one question that comes to mind on that, I know we talked a little bit about, having a emergency savings in your business.
Mhm.
Where do you what do you kind of advise as far as, I need to be saving for the business, business savings, plus investing in, some sort of retirement fund. How do you kind of lead people through that when, especially like you also mentioned this, starting out, it's just kind of like, I just want the business to succeed. I'm taking all the profit, putting it back into the business. You kind of feel that sort of tension.
Yeah. Have you heard of like the profit first
Yes. Yeah.
initiative?
Love
Yeah.
profit first. That's kind of the structure that I use in my own business.
Yeah, it's totally, I have no problem with profit first. So first of all, that's not why I'm bringing it up. Is so but it's basically a kind of a behavioral finance tactic
Yeah.
where you're kind of putting in your mind, I'm going to take out profit first and then figure everything else out after. Well, you can do the same with retirement. You can say, I need this, this is where the planning process is because I don't know, one person versus the other. But let's say
Right.
we're going to take 10% out for retirement. So that's going to be taken out before we do any, well, after profits. We'll take the 10% for retirement and then figure everything else out. And it is remarkable, similar with the profit first model, how you can adapt everything to that. So
Hmm.
one, creating space for it, just like you would with profits, really important. Um, in terms of the other part of the question, which is sort of like the balance between the emergency fund and the other stuff. Typically when just general sort of blanket statement. So you have to kind of adapt this to your own situation. But typically, when we're looking at someone's financial situation, if they have a lot of credit card debt, let's say, um, we would say, hey, make sure to get those emergency funds for at least to cover a month. Because what we don't want to do is something happen and we're now creating more credit card debt to cover those expenses.
Right.
Okay, so we got enough for a month. And so then we pay off the credit card debt. And we kind of develop a plan for paying off the credit card debt. We've done that. And so then what we would typically do is create or build up to that 3 to 6 month ratio and then start to begin focusing in on retirement. Because basically what you'll be doing is taking all that money that you were kind of putting towards building up the savings or the short-term savings. Now we're just moving that into retirement. So it becomes a
Right.
little easier to process. Also, you're not like necessarily not trying to manage too much at once, because
Yeah.
when you're in that situation is really, we first need to make sure you're covered. And so we're not sacrificing the business in order to get to the retirement savings. But we're not putting the retirement savings off forever either.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of looking at like what's the most important thing right now.
Mhm.
And kind of what you said too is kind of it reminds me of just like you're thinking long term and you're thinking strategically like what needs to happen now so that we can get to where we want to be, in the future.
Yeah, and one thing I like to say, actually, I wrote about this on one of the publications that I wrote for recently, is financial planning. Like therapists often create, I would say better than most people I speak to, create time for themselves to think about what they need and what their maybe their goals are or sort of what they want to do in the next like week or whatever, kind
Hmm.
of basically being mindful of the situation.
Yeah.
But what financial planning does do is give that space to think even longer, and a lot of people just don't do that. Like they think like, yeah, one day I'd like to retire on the beach, but they don't really put like numbers to it. They don't put like actual where I would like to go, or they don't crystallize it. It's just kind of like
Yeah.
this floating thing. But like the planning process can actually give you that room to kind of crystallize it. And then my job is just to put numbers to that life goal,
Hmm.
really, is all it is. And that's what it does. And so when we're talking about retirement planning, that's just a tactic. It's just a tactic to get to those life goals.
Yeah. Cool. Absolutely.
Yeah. The other thing I would say from like sort of like a tax maneuvery type of thing is really look at your business structure. I don't know. Do you have a S Corp or an LLC?
LLC.
Yeah. So it really really depends on the person. But you'll talk to some CPAs and they'll say you have to have an S Corp, and you'll talk to some who'll say the LLC is fine. But when you get bigger, we'll look at the S Corp. But the thing I'll say about the S Corp, the value of it is it pays you as both an employee and employer. And so what you're doing is you're basically giving yourself a salary as the
Hmm.
employee. And on that salary, you have to pay what's called self-employment tax. And so this is tax that, let's say you're in-house somewhere. This is tax that you would pay, I think it's about 7.65%. And it covers Medicare and Social Security. And then your employer pays the other 7.65%. So 15.3% total.
Hmm.
When you work for yourself, you have to pay all of that. And so you have to pay, all 15.3% of it. But when you create an S Corp, what you're doing is you're paying yourself as an employee. And as an employee, you have to pay that Social Security and Medicare on the amount that you're paying yourself. But you can also pay yourself as an employer. And this is basically as an investor in the business. So instead of paying on Social Security and Medicare, you don't have to, and you get taxed as capital gains. So instead of your regular income tax rate, which may be like 24% or 32%, you're getting taxed at 20%. So this can be like fantastic savings
Hmm.
because of it. I mean, honestly, it can save thousands of dollars. When I said I took a long time to get to knowing ways to save, this was one tactic that took me a long time to realize the true
Hmm.
impact of it. The caveats are you have to be a certain size because like you can't rob your future in Social Security by avoiding taxes today because you don't want to do that.
Hmm.
You need that. You probably need some of that Social Security figure, down the line. So it's really sort of a balance. But by doing so, if you are of a certain size business at this point, you can really increase the amount that you're keeping for yourself.
Interesting. And what are kind of some of those, like the size of your business, or what kind of stands out to you when you would kind of say, hey, I think you really need to think about an S corp at this point?
Yeah, so it's gonna depend a little bit about on like the person's savings and things of that nature. So with that caveat, I'll say that you tap out, like you don't ever have to pay more Social Security tax once you've reached $145,000 in um, uh, like in this case payroll. So like
Mhm.
once you've reached 145,000, the amount of salary you're giving yourself, you don't pay any, or 106. I think it's 167,000 now. You don't have to pay yourself any more Social Security tax. Um, and so certainly that mark might, but you'd want to do it beforehand because let's say that based on like all your planning, you're going to have a ton of money for retirement. And Social Security is going to be nice, but it's not like a need, right?
Mhm.
You would probably want to do it a little sooner than someone who says, I'm a little suspect on my retirement. I may need that Social Security benefit. Maybe I should continue to fund Social Security to ensure a larger payout. Like I can't give you a specific number,
Right.
but it's like looking at that ratio and sort of figuring out what you're going to have in the future.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, I'm thankful for people like you who can help
Yeah.
people navigate all the ins and outs and the nuances and all this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a really like uh level, Z type of
Yeah.
sort of planning thing. But the one reason I bring it up is one, just to bring people's attention to it, but also I bring it up to one because for people who don't know it, but also to warn people who do know it and immediately think they want the S Corp, because like you'll come across like kind of shady accountants who will put everyone in S Corp because that's going to pay them $1,000 at tax time versus like $500 at tax
Hmm.
time in doing a regular LLC. And the other thing I would add is as you're an LLC, right?
Yep.
Let's say you're going to have a great year this year. You're going to have a great year this year heading into like heading into January 2024, let's say. You just know you're going to have a great year because of like what you have lined up and the things that you've secured. By the end of March, you can say to the IRS, hey, I'm an LLC this year. I'd like to be taxed as an S Corp. And you can actually treat your business as an S Corp that 1 year. You don't have to do all the other S Corp stuff, but that 1 year you can. And then the next year you can go back to being an LLC. So when people are kind of on that line,
Yeah.
we just use the LLC or the S Corp opt-in, and you can do that forever. Like, it's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with it.
Cool.
So yeah, you can still get the benefits without actually being an S Corp.
Cool. Yeah, I have heard that. My wife's mom is actually our accountant, and so she's been doing some research on that stuff. And I think my wife has been kind of on that edge, like, should we do S Corp? And it does make sense, like, to start next year, all that stuff. So I have heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the cool thing about that is that, like, the opt-in, one tax form, super simple. Like, your CPA handles it, or someone like me can even like walk someone through it. But it's just, you just sign it, that's it, and then come tax time, you file as an S Corp.
Cool. Well, do you have any other specific tips that you want to share, for increasing some of these returns in private practice?
Yeah, so there's two more. I don't know how much time we have, so I can either talk about basically the warning of getting into debt within your business, or I can talk about succession planning. So I don't know if you want me to talk about both. Happy to do.
Let's touch on both. If we can kind of, I'd say we've got probably about 5 to 10 minutes. We can kind of,
Yeah.
if you think you pull it together. I know this is deep info here.
Yeah, I hope it's helpful. I do. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. So
Yeah.
like, I try to make it as simple as possible. But it's overwhelming stuff. We'll start with the debt situation, because it's a quick one, and then I'll just briefly mention the succession planning, because probably a few of your audience is worried about that at this point. But the one thing I'll say about business owners is the biggest reason they see them getting into debt is they treat their business credit card like an expense account. And they just say, hey, I'm just gonna buy this, this wonderful meal. I'm gonna put it on the business, and I'll just write it off on taxes later. And what I always say to that is, that's not a one-to-one. Like, when you're writing off on taxes, you're basically saying, I'm not going to get taxed on this amount. And so that's essentially going to the restaurant and getting a 25% coupon and getting 25% off.
Right.
You're still paying 75% of that payment. And so what you often see is businesses who are business owners who can't figure out why they're in debt. And then you look at the business expenses and they're extraordinarily high because they're using it as an expense account. So if you are struggling with debt issues or trying to figure out like where the expenses are coming from and you can't quite figure it out, really dig deep into that business credit card, because it's a good chance that you're going to find stuff in there that you're kind of treating as personal expenses, but saying you're going to write off later.
Yeah. I'm completely on board with that.
Just
just don't do that. Warning received. Warning received.
Fair enough. And then the other thing that I come across is the succession plan. So when I am working with an older therapist, what you'll see is, they have their savings, hopefully intact, and they'll maybe have a house, and then looking at their assets. And from my perspective, I would look at the business typically as an asset in some way. Even if it's $1, it's an asset. You spent your entire life building it. But in the therapy space, what I find is small group practices or solo practitioners, they essentially view the business as worthless without them. And that's not necessarily true. And putting that into your overall financial picture can have incredible benefits. So let's say you make $140,000 as a solo practitioner. But let's say that you went through the steps to potentially sell the business. And, it's a small business. You're not going to get a ton. Let's say you can sell it for, let's say, $200,000. So essentially 1 year's worth of income plus a little extra. Okay. That $200,000 can be extraordinarily helpful for someone who is on the line between having a very successful, comfortable retirement versus someone who can really struggle. in retirement.
Yeah.
And so ignoring the asset altogether is a mistake that I often find, because you also look at just like, social dynamic uh, numbers right now. We're having a huge flow of people retiring and a huge flow of new workers, and the same goes in the therapy space. And so, if as an older therapist you can create steps to sell the business, you can create an opportunity for a younger therapist, but you can also create security for yourself, your family,
Mhm.
or whoever is going to benefit from that money. And so I can talk briefly about how to do that if you'd like, but I just always like to give that as a word of warning, because I do see it as a weakness within the therapy field.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that when most people start out a business, they're probably not thinking about, well, what's this going to be worth someday, and can I sell it? And
Hmm.
I know that I've heard from number of people. Yeah, I had a practice, and then I stopped for a while. Like built it, and then I just kind of quit and just
Yeah,
stopped. Like, well,
yeah.
what did you look into what it was worth? Maybe you just spend like 2 minutes on maybe some of the steps to kind of get started thinking about that, or what would be the next step if you're thinking I want to sell this maybe in the next 5 years.
Yeah, and there's a number. One, first of all, a caveat: I am not a lawyer, so you'll need a lawyer for this process. I just see the impact of it, so
Yeah,
that's really why I talk about it.
yeah,
And I'll talk about the kind of design that I think would work best for particularly a small group practice or that solo practitioner. It's basically what's called a buy-sell agreement. And what you would do is you need to kind of remove yourself a little bit from the marketing face of the business. And so the best way to do that is find someone that you think could do uh, the job well, do it very similar to you, and that you can mentor. And so in the years leading up to stepping away, you find this person, you bring them on, you get comfortable with them. And then when the time is right, you say, hey, I'm interested in potentially moving away from the business. Would you be interested in becoming my partner? And we would develop a plan to pass down what I built to you so you can then go from there. This solves two big issues that I find. One, because like people who work in the therapy space, they're so concerned, obviously, about the one-on-one dynamic of therapy.
yeah,
Um, but like my wife had a therapist who passed away, and it took her years to find another therapist. Like the value of having someone already that your clients could potentially trust when you're stepping away, and that they always see in your marketing, or they always see, if you have an in-person practice, they always see around the office. It's going to be a lot easier to transition that client to that person, because
yeah,
they already know them. They've already seen them. They've seen their smile and whatnot. And then two, it gives you the chance to really handpick your successor. And so it gives you a way to kind of share your knowledge and empower the next generation of therapists. And within a buy-sell agreement, you can actually, when you're ready to say, hey, I want you to become a partner, this you can negotiate that buy-sell agreement years before you're stepping away.
hmm,
And so you're negotiating at a time where, like, it's not an emergency, like you've just had a health situation and can no longer work ever again. That's not the time to negotiate the business.
yeah,
It's time to do it when you're feeling healthy, when you feel good about the partner that you have, and there are ways to set up the sell so they're basically using the business to fund the sell. They're not
yeah,
like pulling into their own finances in order to sell it. So
yeah. Awesome. I love just to kind of what I'm hearing, or everything you're kind of advising is just this sense of like having a good foundation, and also yeah, just that sort of security when you think about these things, and you plan for them, then you're not in these emergency situations. Like you can really plan out how you want your life to look and your finances to look. And
absolutely.
I know that we can kind of keep going deeper and deeper into all this stuff. There's a lot of great information. Ryan, thanks so much for being on. Why don't you let people know where they can find you, and if you got any resources for our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work for a company called United, but I have a personal site where I do a lot of my financial planning discussions and whatnot. So let's go there. It's called thinkingcapfinancial.com. And if you go to thinkingcapfinancial.com/checklist, if you just provide an email, I'll send you a checklist that will basically put you steps ahead of most people from a financial standpoint. It's really geared towards the private practice owner, or even a therapist who works for a private practice. So feel free to check it out there.
Awesome. And we will put that in the show notes for this episode, as always. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, Ryan. This is some really good information. And yeah, and if you're listening, definitely go check out the website and the checklist. And yeah, just keep learning and keep shoring up your finances and setting those goals. Thanks, Ryan.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.